The Assembly Committee on Government Affairs will come to order. Madam Secretary, please call roll.
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Present.
Assemblywoman Black.
Here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you. Assemblywoman Brown May.
Here.
Assemblywoman Considine.
Present.
Assemblywoman Dickman.
Here.
Assemblywoman Duran.
Here.
Assemblyman Ellison. Assemblywoman Martinez.
Present.
Assemblyman Matthews.
Here.
Assemblyman MacArthur.
Here.
Assemblywoman Thomas.
Here.
Assemblywoman Torres.
Here.
Chair Flores.
Present. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please. Assemblyman Ellison is present. All members are present, and we have a quorum. Good morning, everyone. I hope you had a great weekend and an opportunity to spend it with your friends, family, loved ones, and got some good rest. It's going to be a rough, exhaustive week, but I know we're up for it. So I appreciate the upcoming week and the work that we'll be engaging in. We're going to take the agenda slightly out of order. We'll be hearing Assembly Bill 271 first, followed by Assembly Bill 437. We'll then enter the presentation by the City of North Las Vegas, which I know they're not going to have it all that long, so that we can focus all our energy on that, Assembly Bill 55. And then we'll do public comment at the end. For those of you joining us virtually, good morning and welcome to you. I want to remind you that we'll be doing public comment at the very end. Members, I want to ask you to please keep your microphone on mute unless you are speaking, and should you have to turn off your camera, just give us a quick heads up so we understand what's happening on your end. So with that, we'll go ahead and open up the hearing on Assembly Bill 271. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Chair Flores. Good morning, Chair Flores and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Troyce Krumme, that's Troyce Krumme, and I am the Vice Chairman of the Las Vegas Police Managers and Supervisors Association. Joining me this morning is William Hudler, our association chairman. Our association represents the captains, lieutenants, and sergeants of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. AB 271 is a bill designed to require primary law enforcement agencies in certain Nevada counties to provide an adequate number of uniformed first-line supervisors to oversee the work that police officers do in the patrol environment. As policing has seen an increased call for enhanced accountability, and rightfully so, we must remain vigilant in this effort. Based on a pattern of action by the Department of Justice, we can be confident that span of control is an integral component of meaningful police reform, as is evident in the several consent decrees in various police agencies around the country. Patrol officers are typically the first responders on calls that can turn into a critical incident in a moment's notice. Studies have shown that the mere presence of a first-line supervisor on calls such as these can greatly reduce the frequency of a use of force from occurring. Understanding this, police agencies in Nevada, like LVMPD, have adopted policies that require first-line supervisors to acknowledge and respond to calls where certain details are provided, such as when a subject is armed. Police departments also need to do all that they can to prevent instances of police misconduct. The first line of defense in this effort is an available and observant first-line supervisor. Ensuring that agencies have the appropriate ratio of uniformed first-line supervisors to uniformed peace officers is a step this body can make to achieve these efforts. Now I'm going to go over the parts of the bill and then open it up for questions from the committee to myself and the chairman. This bill will be added to Chapter 289, and it's going to read as follows. In a county whose population is 100,000 or more, each primary law enforcement agency shall maintain a supervisory ratio of at least one first-line supervisor per 12 non-supervisory peace officers. 2, ensure consistency and supervision of non-supervisory peace officers by assigning each non-supervisory peace officer to a single first-line supervisor, and schedule the operational period of a first-line supervisor in a manner that ensures that the first-line supervisor is physically available to supervise the number of non-supervisory peace officers required to conform with the supervisor ratio described in subparagraph 1. And B, first-line supervisor shall assist in the de-escalation of any volatile situation, provide supervision and direction as necessary in circumstances in which non-supervisory peace officer employs the use of force, respond as necessary to circumstances in which a non-supervisory peace officer employs use of force, and if required by law or the policy of the law enforcement agency, investigate each circumstance in which a non-supervisory peace officer employed the use of force and ensure that there is documentation of each circumstance. 2, the requirement described in paragraph A of subsection 1 apply to first-line supervisors and non-supervisory peace officers whose primary duties include routine patrol. Consider a field training peace officer and the assigned trainee of the peace officer to be one peace officer for the purpose of any such requirement within the ratio. As used in this section, first-line supervisor means any peace officer who supervises other persons and who is on an organizational level immediately above non-supervisory peace officers. And at the bottom, it gives an explanation of what a primary law enforcement agency means. A police department of an unincorporated city, the sheriff's office of a county, or if the county is within the jurisdiction of a metropolitan police department, the metropolitan police department. Section 2 provides NRS 354-599 do not apply to any additional expenses a local government that are related to the provisions of this act. And then finally, we did remove the effective date of July 1, meaning the intent of this bill is to go effective on October 1 of 2021. And the purpose behind that was, should this bill become law, it would give police agencies enough time, should they see the need to promote additional supervisors and get them trained prior to going on the streets. With that, that is the completion of the amended bill language. Myself and Chairman Hudler are open to any questions.
Thank you for that walkthrough and the presentation. Members, I want to make it clear that we're going off of the mock-up that is under our exhibit list, not the original language itself. With that, we'll open it up for questions, and we'll start off with Assemblywoman Thomas.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. And thank you, Officer Kume, for your presentation. I appreciate it. And with the conceptual amendment that you submitted, I was just wondering why the change? Originally, you had the ratio of 1 and 10. Why the 1 and 12 now?
We had some meetings last week with some stakeholders. One of the stakeholders had presented that a 10-to-1 ratio.
Sure, and if I could just have you state your name for the record each time, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. For the record, this is Troyce Crumey. The original intent of the 10-to-1 was to be in a restrictive manner. However, this is going to be the first time something like this is going to appear in law. And one of the stakeholders suggested that that might be a little bit too restrictive, and if they could allow a little bit of room, since the legislature only meets for 2 years, and if they identified some potential issues, that they would have to wait 2 years. So based on that, on top of reading some of the fiscal impacts, it looked like if we went to 12-to-1, which currently matches the LVMPD policy, that it would provide some fiscal relief to those agencies providing the fiscal note, and then allow a little bit of leeway as we work into this mission.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the answer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for bringing forward this language. On the amendment, when it comes to section 1.13, the schedule of, in a matter that is, if you could expand a little bit more of what you mean by in a manner that ensures that the first line supervisor is physically available. Does that mean that they do not need to physically be there, but can get someplace quickly? I was confused by that language and what exactly that would mean in reality versus policy language.
Understand. That's a great question. That was actually one of the changes that came up through our stakeholder meeting. And for the record, this is Troy Crumey. And Chair, if I could go directly to the Assemblywoman.
Please do. Yes.
So on the original language, it appeared as if the supervisor assigned to the officer would have to always be at work. And obviously that's just not the case. Supervisors are allowed to take vacations. Sometimes they're out on sick. And we wanted to craft this language so that if agencies wanted to use overtime supervisors to call in and cover those shifts where there's not a sergeant available, or on some of the larger agencies, if they opted to promote a cadre of centralized assigned sergeants that aren't necessarily assigned to squads, then that cadre of supervisors could be used to backfill any supervisors in the field that are off. So that language was changed to pick some of that up.
A follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Follow up, please.
Thank you for that clarification. So I think I understand that one. And then is that also where section 1.2a is coming from, where it's only applying to the first line supervisors? Is that for that same reasoning as to why that language was added, or was there another reasoning for that?
For the record, Troy Crumey, that is correct. Our intent of this bill is to address the patrol environment. Some of the larger agencies have detective bureaus, which do a lot of their work out of the office. So we wanted to ensure that the language in the bill addressed what the intent was, which is in the patrol environment. And then additionally, there were some concerns that the stakeholders of the original language of the bill picked up the corrections environment. And that is not our intent. Corrections already has some oversight that provides minimum staffing levels. So we didn't need to pick that up in this bill.
Thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Next, we'll go to Assemblyman Ellison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know how many Washoe has on the force, how many police deputies and everything. What about Las Vegas? What I'm trying to figure out, this is going to have a large impact back on your budgets, is it not?
For the record, this is Troy Crumey. Part of the stakeholder meetings that we did have, there's little doubt that there is going to be some fiscal impact. I believe the fiscal impact lessens on some of the smaller agencies, such as Henderson, North Las Vegas, Mesquite, from the change of 1 to 10 to 1 to 12. But some of the larger agencies, it will have an impact. I believe if I remember reading Washoe County's fiscal impact correctly, it sounds like they might already be meeting the mark. And then they had some concerns that I don't really remember exactly how they worded their concerns. But I believe for Washoe was already meeting the mark. There was some questions about what it would take for Reno to get there, which is, again, one of the reasons why we massaged from 10 to 12.
Follow up, sir.
Follow up, please.
So can you give me an idea how many police officers are in Las Vegas?
Commissioned peace officers?
Yes.
I believe it's between 3,000 and 3,500.
So you figure that they're going to be divided into 12, not counting administration and this kind of stuff. So that's got to have a large impact. And I don't know if they'll do this by shifts or how they do that to supervise something like this. It just seemed to be awful hard and expensive. When are they not doing their duties now, or?
Chair, for the record, this is Troy Crummy. I'm going to bring in Chairman Hudler to assist on this point.
Thank you.
Sure, William Hudler for the record. So to answer your question, I think a couple assumptions are lie in there that all of those police officers work uniform patrol. And if you guys can just recall some of the incidents that have been sort of centralized in our media lately associated with civil rights violations, it usually has to do with officers that are first responders in patrol, or even special weapons and tactics, or like a SWAT environment. And so of the 3,000 plus police officers that are in a large agency like Las Vegas Metro, you consider that there are about 10 area commands within Las Vegas. Within each area command, you have right around 150 police officers. So you're looking at 1,500 patrol personnel. And then the assumption is, okay, so let's take that 1,500 patrol personnel, or right about there, and divide that by 12, and that's how many patrol sergeants. And the numbers can be inflated, and we could use that algorithm to try to fill this gap, which is a crucial gap. But quite frankly, that's not the solution that is required. And let me just give you an example. The reason why we made the amendment to move away from a sergeant, the traditional model of a sergeant leading a group of officers, team policing is what we do usually on the West Coast. So leading a group of officers working that same shift and that same hours. So essentially you could say, hey, you would have to double this amount of sergeants or first line supervisors in patrol. Well, you don't need to do that. And what my colleague mentioned earlier is a feasible solution. It's been employed in other agencies around the country. Currently, and if I can just paint the picture for you, and I'll be as brief as possible, but currently large agencies, not unlike Las Vegas Metro, they have a watch commander program where there are lieutenants who cover the valley 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There are 5 full-time watch commanders, and they work 12-hour shifts. Well, instead of doubling the amount of sergeants in patrol, you could take, which could be in excess, well over 100 sergeants. You could promote a small group of sergeants, assign them to the watch commanders. Those sergeants could float throughout the valley, east and west side of the valley, and they can be assigned at the beginning of their shift as necessary. For example, if a sergeant is quarantined, he or she is now down for several days. One of these watch commander sergeants, or whatever the agency decides to designate them as, can be assigned for that operational period to supervise those officers. And it's not just use of force we're talking about here, and the cost, and that's what I'm going to try to address here. Let's take a look at the cost, right? What was the cost this summer? When we were having our protests, what was the cost, fiscal impact? What was the impact on public trust? Because that's the true measure of police efficacy, is public trust. We shouldn't be looking at tickets and arrest numbers. We should be looking at whether or not people feel good about dealing with their police agency. And just like this committee runs more smoothly with a chair and a vice chair, a team of police officers run more smoothly with an available first line supervisor. I hope that addresses some of the issues, or addresses your question, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next, we'll go to thank you, Assemblyman. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Black.
My question was already answered. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Next, we'll go to, and I'm checking through the chat now. Members, do we have any additional questions? I don't see any in chat, but I may have accidentally skipped somebody. Feel free to announce yourself. Seeing none, at this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 271. If we could go to the phone lines, please, broadcast.
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 271, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers at this time.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite those wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 271.
To testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 271, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is Chuck Callaway, C-A-L-L-A-W-A-Y, representing the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. We're here in strong opposition to AB 271. We believe that this is a bill seeking to fix a problem that doesn't exist. Under our current department policy, we have the capability for a supervisor to call in other supervisors on overtime if span of control goes beyond 12. This is an issue that was negotiated in collective bargaining, and it should remain a collective bargaining issue. I'm not aware of any public body or government agency that has a state statute that requires a certain number of supervisors per their personnel. This is clearly a management right to allocate our resources, and every shift is different and may require different resources based on the job that shift must perform. This bill would result in adding a lot of additional supervisors, which, due to financial concerns, we would probably have to pull from our workforce to fill those positions. So it would result in a decrease in actual officers working the street handling calls, because we would have to shift some of those officers to supervisory positions. And then we have a testing process in place for supervisors. So there would be a concern about getting supervisors tested and meeting the criteria to become a supervisor. I've heard comments that this is a reform issue. If it is a reform issue, why is there a pop cap on it? Certainly, if the unions are trying to claim that this is a reform issue, it should apply equally to all agencies across the state. I also have concerns with the Section 1B that says a supervisor shall assist in de-escalation. Sometimes this is impossible. A supervisor may be on another priority call. Officers are trained in de-escalation, and saying that a supervisor shall assist in any case of de-escalation is literally impossible and could result in liability against the agency. In fact, all of Section B in this bill is currently covered in our department policy. Again, this strips the department of its ability to manage our resources, and we currently have 3,301 police officers on the agency. Some of the testimony in support of the bill said you could do this, you could float officers here, or you could create a roving sergeant patrol. Again, that's management's authority to allocate our resources. This was an issue of collective bargaining. In other issues where we, for example, wanted officers to carry I'm sorry, I forgot what it's called, but the substance for opioid overdose, they said, well, that's a matter of collective bargaining. We want officers to wear bulletproof vests. That's a matter of collective bargaining. We want officers to wear body cameras. That's a matter of collective bargaining. But in this case, the union wants to put something that has been collective bargained into statute. So we are clearly opposed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you for joining us this morning. Next caller in opposition to Assembly Bill 271.
Actually, Mr. Chair, may I ask a question, if that's possible?
I think we're going to wait for now. We have a lot on the agenda, and
Totally understand.
yeah, so we'll wait for now. Thank you, Assemblywoman. If we could continue to the next caller in opposition to Assembly Bill 271.
Caller, with the last three digits of 620. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Mike Cathcart, C-A-T-H-C-A-R-T, representing the City of Henderson. The City of Henderson is a full-service city, which means we provide all municipal services, including police, fire, parks and recreation, water, wastewater, and planning and zoning, among others. Each year, we are required by state law to submit a balanced budget to the Department of Taxation. And on an annual basis, we have a robust discussion on staffing needs in all service areas and make determinations based on resources available. The city is opposed to AB 271 because of the mandated staffing ratio. It is our belief that these discussions should be at the local level. This bill would limit the City Council's ability to determine the best use of city resources on an annual basis. But I also want to thank Mr. Crewmay for spending time with us last week and listening to our concerns. And that is all I have. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us this morning. We'll go to the next caller wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 271.
Caller with the last three digits of 196. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chairman Flores and members of the Assembly Government Affairs Committee. I'm Eric Spratley, E-R-I-C-S-P-R-A-T-L-E-Y. For the Nevada Sheriffs and Chiefs Association, we oppose AB 271 outright, as the staffing ratios for public agencies needs to rest with the elected or appointed administrator for the agency. If they were elected by the people or appointed by the governmental body to run. Legislating a hard number in statute negatively affects leadership's ability to manage their agency. The agency head should be the one determining the proper span of control and scheduling within the agency based on staffing, assignments, emergency operations, and utilization of resources. You've heard testimony that agencies are already doing this. So this is a solution in search of a problem. And we submit to you that there is not a problem. So we ask you to not consider this bill. Ditto to what Chuck Calloway testified to, and ditto to what Mike Cathcart testified to. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you. Next caller in opposition to Assembly Bill 271.
Caller with the last three digits of 211. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chairman Flores and members of the Assembly Government Affairs Committee. My name is Joanna Jacob, Joanna-Jacob, Government Affairs Manager for Clark County. Mr. Chair, we filed a fiscal note on this bill that was on the original language, which would have been a cost of over $69 million to Clark County in each year of the biennium. With the amendment, we believe that we could revise that fiscal note because the original language would have required us to have this staffing ratio with our juvenile justice division. Clark County also funds 100% of the cost of the Clark County Detention Center. We believe that the amendment does narrow down the scope of this bill, but there are some things that were discussed on the hearing today that ideas identified by Mr. Calloway about floating and things like this that are not specifically stated in the amendment. We are still trying to work out the fiscal impact to Clark County, but I will note that that we are responsible for 63% of the costs for Las Vegas Metro Police Department. And so there will still be an impact to Clark County, regardless of how the bill is amended. I echo the concerns of Mr. Cathcart about the balanced budget that must be submitted. And that is, we will continue to work with the proponents. We did speak with Sergeant Crumey about the amendment and the intent. And thank you for his time. But at this time, we are opposed based on fiscal impact to the county. Thank you.
And thank you. Next caller in opposition to Assembly Bill 271.
Caller with the last three digits of 759. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chairman Flores and members of the Assembly Government Affairs Committee. My name is Mary Sarah Kinner, MarySarahKinner, representing the Washington County Sheriff's Office. As was brought up during testimony, the Washington County Sheriff's Office current supervisor to deputy ratio is 1 to 8.5. We meet the staffing ratio, but do not have supervisors supervising deputies on the same shift and in the same location 100% of the time. As a result of our 8, 10, and 12-hour shifts, our supervisors share in the jobs of supervising deputies. We have submitted a fiscal note on this and remain opposed to AB 291. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller in opposition to Assembly Bill 271.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 120. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Stephen Cohen for the record. Stephen with a V, Cohen as in the Assemblywoman, no known relation. The nature of my opposition is the section involving volatile situations. Don't think that it goes far enough to address interactions between law enforcement and people with disabilities, but I am more than happy to work with the sponsor as well as the committee on potential language to accomplish that. With that, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I yield.
Thank you. Next caller in opposition to Assembly Bill 271.
To testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 271, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 294. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Chair Flores and members of the committee, for the record, Callie Wilsey with the City of Reno. That's CALLIWIL, S as in Sam, EY. We thank Mr. Krume for meeting with us last week to discuss the intent of this bill and listen to our concerns. The City of Reno is still opposed to this bill. Even with the amendment, the city expects to continue to see a significant fiscal impact. Additionally, it's critically important that a local government maintain its ability to manage its budget in the best way to address the needs of each local community. I echo the comments made by my fellow colleagues who have already spoken in opposition today. Again, thank you to Mr. Krume for reaching out, and we appreciate the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you. Next caller in opposition to Assembly Bill 271.
Chair, there are no more callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. We'll go to those wishing to testify in the neutral position, 271.
To testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 271, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 080. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, Jim Hoffman, HOFFMAN, representing Nevada Attorneys for Criminal Justice. And I apologize, but I wasn't able to get on during the support portion, but this is support testimony. With the chair's permission, I would like to testify in support at this time.
Okay, we'll switch it over to support. Please continue.
Thank you. NACJ supports AB 271. Police violence and other misconduct are persistent, ongoing problems in Nevada. A lot of this misconduct is talked about in terms of isolated bad apples who don't represent police as a profession or their departments as a whole. To the extent that this argument is accurate, stronger requirements for supervisor staffing will help address the problem and ensure more effective oversight. We don't want these bad apples to spoil the bunch, and this bill would take a step towards preventing that. NACJ therefore supports AB 271. Thank you.
Hey, got to support.
Thank you. And now we'll go to those wishing to testify in the neutral position for Assembly Bill 271.
To testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 271, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in the neutral position at this time.
Thank you. At this time, we'll come back to our presenters. Any closing remarks you may have.
Thank you, Chair. First, we'd like to thank Speaker Frierson for sponsoring this bill. We'd also like to thank the Chair and the members of the Government Affairs Committee for your time in listening to this bill. In closing, we need to acknowledge that we're currently living in the age of police reform. Police agencies, police leaders, police officers, and police associations in Nevada are not against reform. In fact, we in police, we reform all the time. We just refer to it as change. From evolving use of force policies to critical incident review processes, police agencies in Nevada work hard to get these things right and protect the communities we serve. Police associations support those efforts. Effective reform must be evidence-based, designed from best practices, and have the intent of building public trust. The evidence shows that an appropriate number of uniformed first-line supervisors to lead uniformed patrol officers decreases uses of force, lessens the possibility of misconduct, and by doing so will increase public trust. This is why this issue is a reform idea. We would like to encourage the committee to approve this bill and encourage the necessary funding to the police agencies to accomplish this mission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And if I could just have you state your name for the record right there at the end.
I apologize. For the record, Troyce Crumey.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the presentation, and hopefully we can get some dialogue to continue throughout the week, and maybe we can get somewhere where maybe a few folk can jump on the neutral or support side. With that, we'll go ahead and close out the hearing on Assembly Bill 271. Again, thank you both for presenting this morning. Next, we'll open up the hearing on Assembly Bill 437. Good morning and welcome whenever you're ready.
Hi, Jennifer Cant. I am the Executive Director for the Funeral and Cemetery Services Board. We actually sat before the Sunset Subcommittee recently, and they were generous enough to entertain a few changes that had come to our attention needed to occur. I did include some very basic information on the transportation across state lines that came to us through an email. It has to do with basically transporting bodies across state lines when the nearest funeral home resides across that state line. So as you can see from that email, I included specifically referencing Laughlin and Bullhead City. A body would typically travel all the way to Boulder City. The family is then has to pay 2 different funeral homes, and the body's traveling great distances simply because the nearest funeral home resides over state lines. The language that came about in the bill, it references the coroner approving that transfer, and we certainly don't have any issues with that. I assume that maybe they were contacted because there is a significant amount of language in there. The second part of what we had originally asked for has to do with our embalmers, and with embalmers, we have had situations where someone has graduated from mortuary school, but because we have a requirement for the apprenticeship that they have 60 semester or 90 quarter hours of non-mortuary science coursework before they can begin the internship, we've actually had instances where someone's graduated from mortuary school, and then we have to require them to take a few more credits because they didn't quite meet that credit requirement. So I did submit an amendment that still has to do with our original request, which was that 60 semester, 90 quarter hours. It's just that I hadn't seen any draft language before the bill dropped. If the committee will entertain a couple more changes that have come to our attention, we would certainly appreciate that. One has been because of the pandemic, we've had several embalmers that want to come out of retirement who are residing in Vegas. But because they haven't been working the past 2 years as an embalmer, we would have to have them do an apprenticeship again. which is doable. It's fine. I mean, they're basically working under someone, but it certainly would be friendlier to not have to require that. And so you can see this section in there in NRS 642-100. If the committee would allow us to simply say that they've practiced actively for 2 of the last 5 years instead of the 2 years immediately preceding, I think that would be beneficial to some of those people who've wanted to come out of retirement to assist in the pandemic. And then lastly, it's our understanding that the College of Southern Nevada had been working on a mortuary science program, and it came to my attention that we may need to allow them to be in the embalming room observing, but they're currently would have to get families to sign off on that based on the current language. If we could just add that students of an accredited mortuary science program would be allowed into the prep room, that would be helpful as well. And with that, if there's any questions, I'm happy to take those.
And thank you for joining us this morning. With that, we'll open it up for questions, and we'll start off with Assemblyman Ellison. Assemblyman, I believe you're on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry, it jumped back onto mute. On the highway last night, I spent some time on the phone with the coroner from Elko County on this bill. And what he told me that it'd be only 2 counties in Elko, one would be up in Hawaii and the other Jackpot. It'd be the only thing that this bill would pertain to. But he said the way this bill is written right now, and I'm hoping he's going to call in either under neutral or opposed. But the way this bill is right now, by the time if there was a question where they found a body, it would take up to 2 to 3 weeks sometimes to get the report back to go to the coroner. And here it says that this doesn't always go to the coroner. Is that correct?
In terms of the language that was drafted here for the transportation across the state line section, I mean, there's, it references the coroner authorizing the transportation, but they would be doing that prior to a removal permit being issued, which is usually what would happen. So typically a funeral home in Nevada would go into the electronic death registry system, and they would basically submit information that goes to vital records to get a removal permit to take the body out of the state. This seems to suggest that the coroner in that county would authorize it, and I don't know how that authorization would occur. I assume it could be as simple as a phone call or an email saying, can we take this body? We don't think that this is going to be a coroner case, and then allow them to take it across state lines and then have the coroner issue the death certificate after. But if there are concerns from the coroner's office with how this part is written, I would certainly defer to them, because, this is not, in terms of the funeral board really having a say in this, we just don't. I mean, this is vital records in the coroner, but it is an issue that we had brought to the Sunset Subcommittee's attention based on that email that I included as part of my exhibit.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Follow up, please.
So if you have a body that's not determined if it was natural or homicide, it would still go back to the state of Nevada crime lab, usually in Washoe, from every place but Clark. So if that is the case, then the body wouldn't be transferred to Idaho or whatever. It'd have to be transferred back to Washoe to determine the cause of death. Is that not correct?
It's my understanding, based on reading this, that this would only apply to cases that would not be coroner cases. So if there's any understanding that this would have to be a case that would have to go to the coroner's office for any type of autopsy, this would not apply. They would still, initially they get transported to a funeral home typically, especially in those rural counties. And then they go from the funeral home to, usually Washoe County ME or Clark County Coroner's Office.
Okay, and thank you. And we didn't know the bill was going to jump up that quick. So, and I apologize for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm hoping he does call in and he can give us his concerns. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Members, any additional questions? I'm checking the chats now. I don't see them, but I may have accidentally skipped somebody. Please feel free to announce yourself. I don't see any additional questions at this time. At this time, broadcast, if we can go to the phone lines and invite those wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 437.
Testify in support of Assembly Bill 430. Please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in support at this time.
Thank you. At this time, we'll go to those wishing to call in opposition to Assembly Bill 437.
To testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 437, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. It's my understanding that a few folk are trying to call in. Should you be in opposition or support during the neutral testimony, please still call in. I want to make sure that we give you an opportunity to get on the record. So for now, we'll move to those wishing to call in the neutral position. But again, if you're listening to this hearing and you are either in support or opposition, I still want you to call in. We'll get you on the record. So make sure you please call in. We'll go to those calling in the neutral position.
To testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 437, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 211, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Chair Flores. This is Joanna Jacob, Clark County Government Affairs Manager, JOANNAJACOB. I'm calling in neutral, Chair Flores and members of the committee, based on the testimony. I was just listening to this bill, and I would like to work with Ms. Kant on this, because when this bill did drop very quickly, as Assemblyman Ellison noted, and I apologize to Ms. Kant, because we actually had flagged this with our coroner's office as a potential fiscal impact to Clark County. So would like to work with her on the clarification, as she stated on the record on this. And so just testifying neutral on this, Mr. Chair, with apologies to Ms. Kant, to say that we'd like to work with her on this. Thank you. And I guess I'll just clarify, Mr. Chair, just clarify that the fiscal impact, when we read this bill, we thought that it may impact the coroner's office, and we have approximately about 1,600 cases that we, on average, that this may impact. So that was our fiscal concern. Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Chairman. I neglected to put that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you. No worries. We'll go to the next caller wishing to testify in the neutral position to Assembly Bill 437.
Chair, there are no more callers in the neutral position at this time.
And I'll put this out there one more time. If there is anybody wishing to testify in support, opposition, or neutral to Assembly Bill 437, if you could please call in at this time. I know that you're trying to get on the record, so I'm trying to give you some time to call in.
One just came in, Chair.
We have some folk from Elko calling in. Please. Broadcast, I apologize, I interrupted you.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 213. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 213. Please press *6 now to unmute yourself, and then slowly state and spell your name for the record. Again, caller with the last 3 digits of 213. Please press *6 now to unmute yourself, and then slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Chair, there are no other callers at this time.
Thank you. Assemblyman Ellison, I know that you were trying to make a statement, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We had your office trying to get a hold of him because when he called me last night, but what I would like to do if I could, Mr. Chair, is if I can get a written statement from the coroner and then maybe get it to you and get it in the record. But one of the issues was also is an issue pertaining to one of the areas that pertains to Clerk and Elko is Indian reservations and, a sovereign nation issue and out of state. So there was some concerns there also. So I'm hoping that I can at least get it in writing and get it to you prior to the bill going to work session.
Understood. Thank you, Assemblyman. And just let the record reflect that we do know for a fact that the coroner from Elko was trying to call in, but we'll make sure that we get the written statement submitted up on Nellis and that all members receive that in their inbox. Ms. Kant, any closing remarks you may have?
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer Camp, for the record. Thank you, Chair Flores and members of the committee. I just certainly want to state that we would defer to the coroners in all situations that are related to this bill. So if they are, however they want to make changes that they think are suitable, we certainly would think that it's their right to do so. And this was more an attempt to help families with crossing state lines and not having to pay to funeral homes in the process and having bodies transferring long distances. But if the coroners have issues with how this is written, we're open to whatever language they would suggest. So thank you.
Thank you. So I'm confident that you have a week to work with a lot of different stakeholders and that we'll get to a place where everybody's comfortable. And thank you, Assemblyman Ellison, for getting Elko's concerns on the record. And I'm sure Ms. Kant will reach out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. With that, we'll go ahead and close out the hearing on Assembly Bill 437. And next, we'll open it up for the presentation by the City of North Las Vegas. Members, I want to remind you to please refrain from asking any questions pertaining to the bill itself. We'll do that during the bill hearing. This time it's just for us to get our feet wet and get a general understanding of what the city of North Las Vegas is doing, plans on doing, and has been doing. And then afterwards, we'll go into the hearing itself. So with that, for those of you joining us from the city of North Las Vegas, good morning, welcome to you. And we'll go ahead and open up the presentation whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Chairman Flores and committee members. My name is Rebecca Gibson, and I'm the Chief of Staff for the City of North Las Vegas. Joining me today is Councilwoman Pamela Boynes-Brown, City Manager Ryan Juden, Assistant City Manager Alfredo Malesio, and Finance Director William Hardy. We appreciate the opportunity to give this committee a closer look at the City of North Las Vegas and brief you on our efforts to both mitigate the current health crisis presented by COVID-19 and combat the economic challenges presented as a result of the pandemic. With that, I'll turn the presentation over to Councilwoman Boynes-Brown and City Manager Juden.
Good morning, Chairman and Committee. My name is Ryan Juden, for the record, RYANNJUDEN. I'm the City Manager for the City of North Las Vegas. I want to thank Chairman Flores for accommodating us. I did hear him when he said not all that long. I appreciate that guidance, and we will try and follow that as we're sitting around the table here today. I also want to thank LCB for the very structured and seamless process for this hearing today. I do know with all the changes that are happening during the pandemic, being able to communicate, having these kind of public conversations is not an easy thing to accommodate. So I do want to recognize them and let you know, Chairman, that they have done a tremendous job in making sure this is very, very easy for us to do. So going to our slide presentation, a lot of it, especially following the Chairman's Council to keep it short, you know a lot about the City of North Las Vegas. Our City Council is made up of 4 wards. They're each elected individually in their ward. We also have a mayor that's elected at large citywide. One of the things you'll notice in the map on page 2 of the presentation is there's a lot of space left in North Las Vegas for growth. And that is really where you'll see a lot of the growth in Southern Nevada will be happening within the city of North Las Vegas as we continue to grow that city. We have, similar to other incorporated cities in Nevada, we have a council manager structure of government. The city council provides direction for the city. City manager hires all the staff, prepares the budget and staffing plan, and makes recommendations on policy decisions. We have a very good working relationship between management and our elected officials. And in concert with the city attorney's office, that relationship was on display as we worked through the pandemic hand in hand with our elected officials, and we're able to be very nimble in addressing the immediate concerns that our community was facing. Some of the highlights you'll see on slide 4 from this past 2 years is one very large one. The members of this committee that have been on the committee for a while know that the city of North Las Vegas has worked very hard to get Apex Industrial Park open and for business. And so with the approval of a $250 million water and sewer pipeline, water line going out to Apex, sewer line coming back to Apex, this really prepares a breadbasket for economic development for Southern Nevada. Opening those 18,000 acres out north of town is something that's been vital to our region, something our region has really lacked when we compare ourselves with other peer regions throughout the country, especially in the Southwest. You can see the home sales in Nevada. We've led in Clark County with new home sales. We've also seen 18 million square feet of new construction that has happened this year. It is definitely a lot of growth that's happening in North Las Vegas. If you drive north on the I-15 from Craig Road going out towards Apex, you will see the growth on either side. This has been a priority of council and mayor. We've implemented a policy called Grownomics, where we sought to address the fiscal challenges we inherited in the city of North Las Vegas in 2014 by growing a new tax base. This is slide 5 is our budget. It wasn't too long ago, in fact, 5 years ago, when the city of North Las Vegas had 156 million long-term structural shortfall. Our credit rating was junk status. We came to the legislature in 2017, passed SB 78, and with working with the legislature, that was a critical bill. Chairman Flores remembers well that bill allowed us to really start to change the credit of the city of North Las Vegas. And we just saw an example of that this past week, where we were able to go to bond and refinance some bonds that saves the city almost on that particular bond sale was about $400,000 a year in total by refinancing bonds. Now that we've been able to increase our credit rating thanks to the legislature's working with us. We're saving ratepayers millions and millions of dollars a year. That was just in interest payments going to banks. That's resulted in that increase in services, allowed us to bring things back into the city, such as our community corrections facility. You will notice the consolidated taxes is a large portion of our budget. When the pandemic hit, as well as with all local and state government, that was a big impact to us. At that time, we were looking at a 3-year shortfall of $107 million. Because of projections have been a little better than what we initially projected, we've seen that cut in half. We're still looking at a structural deficit over 3 years, but we believe that we're with the efforts that we took, as well as with the federal relief dollars that are coming in, we're going to be able to continue doing all we can to make sure that our services to our residents are not impacted. On slide 6, you'll see that public safety, like other local governments, is a very large portion of our budget. If you ask most of our residents, when they look towards our municipal government, what they look towards us to provide services is police and fire. That's one of the primary roles that we play as a local government, directly there with the people. Yes, we have libraries and parks and all kinds of other wonderful services for our residents, but at the end of the day, public safety is something that they expect from local government. The next slide is CARES dollars. We took a much different approach than a lot of other jurisdictions that you've talked with when it comes to CARES dollars. As just a quick timeline, as states began receiving these funds in mid-April, it wasn't until June 29th that the governor announced the funding plan of how these dollars would be allocated to local governments. Many of the people on this committee, many of the members on this committee worked with the city of North Las Vegas when we learned that we were being excluded from direct allocations of dollars. Thankfully, Clark County stepped up and provided a grant award of $23.7 million. And right away, council prioritized getting these dollars into the community to shore up the tax base and to make sure that we could avoid the economic crisis that the city weathered during the Great Recession. And they set a goal for over 80% of these dollars to be put directly into the community. And it's important to recognize, if you see the allocation, 83% of these dollars did go directly to the community. This was in concert with working with our employees and our unions and labor groups to make sure that we were able to facilitate this goal. And that 17% that went to the city, in the form of mitigating direct effects of COVID, from PPEs to vaccination efforts to changes we need to make within City Hall in order to accommodate social distancing. So really, the CARES dollars that we received, we use them as direct relief dollars. You can see, I just want to highlight a couple things on these CARES dollars. And then we're going to dive in just real quickly into COVID testing and to SNUMA. One of the things we did early on, if you all recall, it was the 13th of March, Friday the 13th, that there was a statewide declaration of emergency. And I haven't been through a lot of statewide declarations of emergency, but I think generally speaking, when they happen on Friday the 13th, they're not going to be good news. And as we're still operating within a state of emergency in the state, we've seen that this has truly been the case. One thing that I wanted to highlight is how our staff responded to COVID directly. And a great example of this is looking at our library staff. So that declaration was on Friday. By Tuesday morning, our library staff was at Three Square, providing and packing lunches for students that had just, on Sunday, schools were closed. And many of our students, we were concerned about where they were going to get their next meals. So we had library staff, as well as other parking enforcement, other staff that may not be essential in a time of pandemic. We transitioned them very quickly to providing transitional services, to providing essential services for our community. They were packing food at 3 Square. They then were trained later on. They were trained by Southern Nevada Health District with contact tracing. They were actively contacting and calling to help with the early efforts of contact tracing. In fact, they then trained other people on contact tracing as Southern Nevada Health District became overwhelmed with the challenges. They worked with our grant coordinator to stand up a call center that was dedicated to business owners and provide assistance to help our residents navigate through all the different changing things that were happening at a federal level. We spoke with thousands of people directly. We sent out thousands of robocalls, thousands of emails weekly to update our residents on information as it was changing, to make sure we were connecting them to both federal resources, and as state resources started to come on, we wanted to make sure we were connecting them with state resources also. We also provided rentals and mortgage assistance to a number of our homes, our households in North Las Vegas. We also were one of the first entities that let out on working with NV Energy to provide utility assistance to over 4,000 residents. I think the Nevada, what we did with the CARES dollars really highlights a lot of the efforts that we've spent definitely during the last year, but also just underscores the dedication that we have of our employees, the dedication we have of the folks that work here in City Hall and throughout the city of North Las Vegas. I'd like to now turn the time over to Councilwoman Goins-Brown that's going to provide a brief update on SUMA.
Good morning, Chairman and members. Pamela Goins-Brown, for the record, PamelaGoynesBrown. When this pandemic began, we knew that our kids, or I like to call them my babies, would see a tremendous negative impact. So students in North Las Vegas have been historically disproportionately impacted by the pandemic and the resulting closure of schools. So one example, just the data from CCSD related to lost students showed that of the students who were not contacted at all by CCSD during the spring 2020 semester, more than 1/3 or 36% of those students lived in North Las Vegas zip codes. Of the students who did not log on the first day of school in the fall of 2020, 1/4, 25% of those students lived in North Las Vegas zip codes. And just for reference, North Las Vegas only makes up about 10% of the county's population. So as our schools have been historically underfunded, and as the state's largest majority city, we see the impact that has exacerbated here. Our families don't have the same access to technology, high-speed internet, or other resources that other areas in the county have. So when it became clear at the end of the summer that our babies would not be going back to school in person, we knew that we had to do something about it. And we thought outside the box, and we started SNUMA. And SNUMA is the Southern Nevada Urban Micro Academy, which is a homeschool co-op that operates at 3 locations around the city: Silver Mesa Rec Center, Alexander Library, and our Neighborhood Recreation Center. We provided free, safe, in-person alternative for children who otherwise would be left behind. We have a very diverse group of kids, and as you can see, we provide information both in English and Spanish to reach as much of our population as possible. In the fall semester, we had around 50 kids in the microschool program. Based on their initial assessments, many were falling behind before coming to us. So for example, 78% tested way far below grade level in reading in August, not just a little bit behind. So we had to step in and do something. By the time the semester ended, we saw that kids were making tremendous gains, and it was the same results in math. Word of our success got out. So today we've doubled our number of kids in SNUMA. We have about 100 kids that are spread across our 3 locations. Other organizations, large and small, from across the country have reached out to us to see how we did it, including the Catholic Archdiocese of Los Angeles and the University of Washington Center for Educational Leadership. SNUMA has been featured in USA Today for our innovative thinking. Locally, Shade Tree set up their own program based on SNUMA. So this spring semester is on pace just to be as successful, if not more so, than the fall. Our kids have embraced the program, and we are excited to continue watching them grow and to make great strides. So with that said, we're going to move into talking about our vaccine efforts. I'll let our Assistant City Manager, Alfredo Malesio, take over from here.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for the record, I'm Alfredo Melesio, ALFREDO MELESIO. I am the Assistant City Manager for the City of North Las Vegas. Our vaccination efforts began in early January, and we were very quickly ramped them up. We were able to, over a weekend, stand up a robust and popular appointment system at vaxnlv.com for our pod for just $6,800 with no crashes or slowdowns for the public. We really wanted to make sure North Las Vegas residents took advantage of having a large vaccination pod here in the city. But we found that people from all over the county were choosing to come to our site because the sign-up process was simple and our vaccination process is quick and efficient. We also didn't want to forget about those who were showing very quickly that we're getting under-vaccinated. So we reached out and did pop-up registration sites at neighborhood grocery stores, gas stations, and other businesses. We did bilingual phone calls to residents in targeted zip codes, bilingual emails. And once the state system was up and running, we redirected vaxnlv.com website to the actual state appointment system in cooperation with them. We also did public service announcements in English and Spanish on community radio and in grocery stores, and for social media and the television. Some of the more latest things we're doing, this week we have 100 appointments for homebound residents, and we've stood up a hotline for that, and also a hotline to help folks who need transportation to the different vaccination sites. This weekend, the councilwoman and I volunteered at the MLK Center, where we did over 400 vaccinations. And this Saturday, we're going to be doing a drive-up vaccination site here outside at the North Las Vegas City Hall. To date, we have done about 67,000 vaccinations. Different staff have volunteered at the site. And on a personal level, my wife and I also volunteered at a vaccination site this weekend. So it's a professional obligation and also a personal thing for us to get our communities going again. And I'll turn it back over to the city manager.
Thank you. So on the final, well, not the final, yeah, almost final slide. Some upcoming challenges that we're looking at are not anything really different than what the state is looking at also. We are very concerned with what we call the masking effect. Of so far, there's been about $20 billion in federal relief dollars that have come to the state of Nevada. That, of course, is dramatically increasing with the latest round of federal relief dollars. We're concerned of what impact that has as far as masking some of the true pain in our community. While yes, we believe the relief dollars are helping to kind of fill in some of the trough that we expected with the downturn of the economy, we also are looking very closely at what impact do the moratoriums on rental and mortgage, what impact are those having? We do know that nationally delinquencies that are at a 2-decade high, the highest they've been in over 2 decades. That's of concern to us. We think that while we're not seeing high numbers of foreclosures at this point, we do believe that that's something that we see on the horizon that we need to be preparing for. North Las Vegas was particularly, we led the nation in home foreclosures during the Great Recession. We do not intend to repeat that. So we're looking very closely at that because we know that that is something that tracks very closely to unemployment. And if you see the unemployment numbers for North Las Vegas, some of this is concerning because we're not sure how much of it is true unemployment, meaning people are actually out looking actively for jobs, and how much of it is unemployment that has a bit of a different number due to the relief dollars that are coming into people's homes. But it is something that we're looking closely at. We're looking and trying to identify, despite not having, we at this point, as well as the state, does not have Treasury guidance on what to do with the latest round of relief dollars, but the city of North Las Vegas is slated to receive $47 million. We intend to use those dollars very similar to how, or we've been given direction from mayor and council to use those dollars very similar to how we used the first round of dollars, prioritizing this time to make sure that there's no interruption in municipal services that are provided to our residents, as well as looking for ways to provide services. We're thankful for the state and the guidance they put out in the last couple of weeks. We agree entirely with you all that we need to make sure that we're not having duplicative programs and that we're maximizing the impact where we reach and where we touch, and to stay in our lanes and make sure we maximize the impact to help our residents and make sure that these tax dollars go for their intended purposes of providing relief to our businesses and residences. With that, We are now open to any questions that the committee may have, but tried to keep it as brief as we could, Chairman Flores. I will have you know, we did scratch out a lot of stuff and drop some thoughts and notes to keep it brief for this committee.
Thank you for the presentation and that overview, and I appreciate you trying to walk through that as quickly as you can. I know it's just so much to cover that it's difficult to make that any shorter. So again, thank you. I know we do have a couple of questions. Members, I do want to ask that you please try to focus your energy on the actual bill itself. But there may be something very pressing that you need to get on the record now. Should that be the case, we'll give you the opportunity to do so. But I would like to ask that most of us try to focus our questions on the bill itself. With that, we'll open it up for questions. Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question at this time. Otherwise, we'll move on. Thank you again for the presentation. I know that we'll have some members who are going to directly message you, requesting some additional breakdowns and information that they just want to have as they navigate through this legislative session. So with that, we'll go ahead and close out the hearing, or better said, the presentation of the City of North Las Vegas. And at this time, we'll open up the hearing on Assembly Bill 55. Welcome back.
Good morning, Chairman Flores and members of the committee. My name is Rian Jarvis Denman. I'm a Deputy City Attorney for the City of North Las Vegas. And I'm going to be presenting AB 55, which revises provisions to the City of North Las Vegas City Charter. Thank you very much to the committee for hearing this bill this morning. As a brief background, the City of North Las Vegas brought a similar bill last session, which was SB 464. This was also a bill to amend the city's charter. We received several comments and feedback from this committee last session on SB 464. So we did make a lot of changes to AB 55, or the bill draft for AB 55, and brought it back this session. The purpose of the bill is just to clarify language of the charter and city procedures to allow for smoother city operations and clarity in the charter. I'm just going to go through it section by section, and then I will take any questions you may have. Section 1 of the bill, this is just updating language to section 2.020 of the city's charter, changing the word let to entered into, which is more updated language and is clearer. Section 2 of the bill makes changes to section 2.035 of the city's charter. Again, this is just updating language for clarity, changing the word papers to documents and data, just to encompass electronic data and various other forms of communication. Section 3 of the bill makes amendments to section 2.050 of the charter regarding special meetings of the city council. This is an important procedural change, especially with the current state of emergency. The city attorney's office, in working with council and management at the very beginning of the pandemic, realized when we were trying to call emergency meetings that the charter was not specifically clear on emergency meetings. And so we did have to conduct research with open meeting law and the AG manual on open meeting law to determine what steps we could take to get an emergency meeting of council. So the language that's in here is a combination both of the bill we brought last year and the research that we did this year for emergency meetings. And it is similar to other cities' charters. It clarifies the process for calling an emergency meeting and calling special meetings and how those must comply with NRS 241 open meeting law. But again, just provides an avenue for us to know what to do when emergency meetings need to be called more clearly. Section 4 of the bill makes changes to section 2.100 of the city charter regarding the enactment procedure for ordinances. This is just clarifying language and clearing up how council introduces, amends, approves, and postpones ordinances. There were some
different interpretations throughout the city about how this process worked. Currently, a bill is introduced to the city council at one meeting, and then at the next meeting, it's heard by council again, and that's when it can be adopted and voted upon. This just clarifies that at that second meeting, council can amend the bill, postpone voting on the bill. They can vote on the bill at that time. And then the next meeting of council, if the bill was postponed, this clarifies that at that next meeting, council can then vote on that bill rather than having to reintroduce the bill. Section 5 of the charter, this is again just clarifying language, amending section 2.120 of the city charter, changing corporation to city, and just clarifying some of the language in some subsection 1B. That's just to maintain consistency throughout the charter. Section 6 of the bill is also clarifying language. This is an amendment to section 2.200 regarding the powers of city council in rights of way and public places. When we were reviewing the charter for updating language, we realized that it just needed to be in there that there are parameters to how council can regulate certain things in public places, and it does have to be constrained by the Nevada Constitution and the US Constitution, which it is currently, but this language was added in just to make sure that that provision isn't taken in a vacuum at some point, that everyone understands that this has to be done in accordance with the Nevada Constitution and the United States Constitution. Section 7 of the bill, again, is updating and clarifying language, really just to make it sound better and more understandable in section 7. Section 8, we changed animals and poultry to just animals. Poultry should be included in that. And we changed the word pound to animal shelter just to clarify more about what that type of facility is. It's more of an animal shelter than a pound. Section 9 of the bill, more clarifying language. This is just to ensure that the administration of the city is conducted efficient and properly, and this would be determined by council. Council is the body that appoints the city manager and has control over that. So it would be up to them to make sure that that administration of the city on all affairs is efficient and proper. Section 10 of the bill, again, is some cleanup language really in section 10. This is changing section 3.040 of the city's charter regarding the city clerk provisions. A lot of the responsibilities in there were duplicative. So this is just consolidating that language and also updating that language. We spoke to the city clerk and went through and made these changes so that it was clearer what the city clerk's duties are. And the record keeping measures that she has to take and everything to make sure that that section just looks better and is easier to understand and interpret. Section 11 of the bill revises section 3.050 of the charter, adding in a phrase about removal of the city attorney being in accordance with the terms of the city attorney's employment contract. The city attorney's employment contract would necessarily discuss termination. So this was included to ensure that that is the document that's looked at when termination is necessary. Section 12 of the bill is just clarifying language to bring this closer to other surrounding jurisdictions' charters. This was specifically taken from Henderson's charter. Because these positions all necessarily have the ability to try to collect debts and taxes on behalf of the city. So this is an amendment to section 3.090 regarding the collection and disposition of monies to include the city manager and city attorney and their ability to bring legal actions and collect those debts and taxes on behalf of the city. Section 13 of the bill amends the municipal court section of the charter. This adds an entire new subsection, which would be section 4.025, This was modeled after the Las Vegas City Charter. The language was taken from there, and just the ordinance references were changed to match the city's ordinances. This would allow council the flexibility to appoint hearing commissioners to the court so that commissioners could hear traffic cases and free up the judicial departments. Las Vegas currently has traffic commissioners, and this would be the same thing. The majority of the cases that are heard in municipal court are traffic related matters, but the court also hears domestic violence, DUI, petty larceny, and other violations of municipal code. So this would be an option for the court to have somebody else to hear lower level of offenses, and it would be less of a cost to the city than opening up additional judicial departments. And as the city grows, it may be necessary to have this. This provision would not create a hearing commissioner position. This would just give council the option to appoint hearing commissioners in the future if necessary for the city to do that. Section 14 of the bill is just a conforming change with Section 13. So that language was added in there to Section 4.030 to reference the hearing commissioner in that section as well. The sections 15 through Section 20, I won't go through each of those, but they are changing, updating language, changing the word situate to situated. Again, this is just to make the charter clearer, and there were a few grammatical and consistency changes that were made in those sections. So I won't go through each one, but if you do have any questions, please let me know. Other than that, that concludes my presentation, and thank you again for letting us present this bill this morning.
And thank you for joining us this morning. So I know we have quite a bit of questions, so I'll try to take them in the order I see them. And thank you for doing that section by section walkthrough. You'd be surprised how many bills we hear where that doesn't get done. So thank you. We'll start off with Assemblyman Matthews, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Jarvis-Denman, for the presentation. I've got questions regarding the sections of the bill having to do with record keeping, particularly section 10 and then subsection 1C, I believe it is, strikes provisions that allow the record of papers filed by the clerk to be admitted as evidence in court. I'm just kind of wondering if you could speak to what the intentions here, the objectives, why this is necessary. I think it raises sort of some concerns regarding transparent government and access to information. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that section 10, subsection 1C, and why that's needed. Do you have concerns about accountability and access? Thank you.
Thank you. Rion Jarvis-Denman for the record. Chairman Flores, through you to Assemblyman Matthews. Thank you for your question, Assemblyman Matthews. So that what subsection, or I'm sorry, under section 10 of the charter, subsection 1C of section 3.040 of the city charter, those changes were just made because they were sort of duplicative throughout the charter. So the city clerk right now, she keeps track of all records that are official records of the city. She keeps all transcripts of city council hearings and of other meetings, meeting minutes, agendas, that kind of thing. Any lawsuits that are filed with the city, official orders, those would be kept with the city clerk's office. So she keeps all of that as public records, and it does all get consolidated by her office so that she can respond to public records requests. And she has a specific method of keeping all records together. That language was just taken out because there were other areas that reference that language. So if you go through that section, we haven't deleted anything specifically. We have just rearranged it. So all of that information would still be kept by the clerk's office. It's just changed the wording so that it is a little bit clearer and more concise in that provision. I hope that answers your question, but please let me know.
Yes, thank you. Quick follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Please follow up.
Thank you. Also in section 10, subsection 8, this deletes subsection 8, which made the clerk the custodian of records. Who would become the custodian of records under this bill? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Rion Jarvis Denman, again for the record. Chairman Flores, through you to Assemblyman Matthews. The city clerk is still the custodian of records, and there are other provisions that still elaborate on that. Subsection 1B would include that the clerk keeps the official city records. And then let me see if it says it specifically in the bottom of that provision. Yes, so in subsection 2 of section 3.040, it says that all copies of all papers are kept on file with the city clerk. So again, that provision was taken out just to consolidate the duties, but the duties are still listed in there, and the city clerk would still be the official record keeper of the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Jarvis, for the presentation. It's a lot of stuff going on here. So I've got 3 questions. The first is actually from section 4, subsection 2, section 2.2, where it says on line 35 that if there's any amendments that may be proposed and the proposed ordinance may be finally voted upon at any future meeting, but yet when you're presenting that, you said at the next meeting. Future and next are very different. Which one should it be? Because future's got me concerned.
There we go. Thank you. For the record, again, my name is Rion Jarvis Denman, Chairman Flores, through you to Assemblywoman Anderson. Thank you for your question. Yes, so I did say next meeting. I think that's just generally what happens is that a bill is postponed to the next meeting because generally council is either there's been concerns raised at a meeting or they're trying to address something and it usually only takes till the next meeting to get it. But yes, the way that the language is drafted does say just any future meeting. So council would need to postpone and either say that it would be going to the next meeting or that it would be going to a future meeting of the council.
Oh, thank you for that. And if I may follow up, Mr. Chair.
Please follow up.
Thank you. So thank you for that clarification. I do think it needs to be much firmer than just future. Unfortunately, I think many of us have been caught up in other things, which 3, 4, 5 meetings later, it's brought back up. So my next question is both in new language, but also in the current language under section 6. I'm very concerned about the freedom of speech and the ability to and this is not new language, and I realize that it's not, but this 4A, any practice tending to annoy persons passing in such public places, that's very concerning language. And there's many other areas of section 6 that are almost an infringement on freedom of speech. So if you could expand upon that a little bit more, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Rion Jarvis Denman for the record. Chairman Flores, through you to Assemblywoman Anderson. Thank you for that question, Assemblywoman Anderson. We certainly had the same concerns as you when we first proposed this language at the last session. The City Attorney's Office was reviewing the charter changes, and we thought that that was pretty interesting that that language had already been in there and that it did need to be it needed to be reined in, because anything that council does regulate in public places regarding speech is governed by the First Amendment and the Nevada Constitution First Amendment as well. So that was our concern, and that was why that language was added in. But yes, a lot of that language is very antiquated and must have just come up with the original drafting of the charter. So I do understand the concerns there, and we share the concerns. So we want to make sure that it is clear that the city can only regulate within the bounds of the Nevada Constitution and the United States Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you. I understand where you're coming from, but I still think there's an opportunity for us to clean that up even further in the policy language. It's a concern. And then my last question comes from section 13. I know that you mentioned that it comes from Las Vegas City Charter. Or is it present in any, other charters?
Thank you. Rion Jarvis Denman for the record. Chairman Flores, through you to Assemblywoman Anderson. I am not aware of this language being in any other charters. No, I believe this is just in the Las Vegas City Charter. But my assumption is that because Las Vegas is a very large city, that they would need the hearing commissioners. And as our city is growing, that's our concern, is that we may eventually need a hearing commissioner to assist the judicial departments in municipal court. Thank you.
Thank you. And so I'm going to need you to walk me through it a little bit, if I may. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me this much time. I need you to walk me through this. I want to make sure that our individuals are still able to have a public defender if necessary. When it comes to a hearing commissioner, I just don't know enough about the hearing commissioners and how they're utilized. So if you could walk me through that a little bit, I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Rion Jarvis Denman for the record. Chairman Flores, through you to Assemblywoman Anderson. Yes, that's absolutely. The hearing commissioner would be kind of taking the place of the judge, the current, whichever judge is there. So a hearing commissioner would just be the same exact person essentially as a judge, but it would not carry the additional cost to the city, because this person could be hired on a part-time basis or contracted, that kind of thing. So it wouldn't necessarily be require the same things, like a whole new department and that kind of thing. However, they would still be hearing cases. People would still have the right to representation on certain cases. Now, in traffic tickets, that's a little bit different, but it would be the same. They would still conduct a hearing or still conduct trials if people wanted to go to trials on traffic matters. But other than that, it would be it would just help the city to avoid costs of creating an entire new judicial department.
Okay, so would there be a listing of where those public defenders would be? What sort of court cases the public defenders would still be able to be utilized, or would that be an internal policy? I need a little bit more, get into the weeds in a way.
Thank you. Rion Jarvis Denman for the record. Chairman Flores, through you to Assemblywoman Anderson. The public defenders, people are provided the right to representation on cases based on the Constitution and Nevada law. So anybody who is entitled to a public defender in a criminal case would still be entitled to a public defender, regardless of if they are in front of a hearing commissioner or a judge.
Thank you so much. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Thank you for the answers. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that much time.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Considine.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Denman, for the presentation. I'm actually asking a few questions in the same area that Assemblywoman Anderson just asked. I know that you mentioned that the hearing commissioner would take the place of a judge, but would be saving money. But I guess one of my first questions is, but the hearing masters are appointed. So to me, that would be different than a judge, because judges are elected. And it was my understanding that recently, did North Las Vegas just expand to another municipal court and bring on another judge? And if so, I know you're looking down the road, but then what are the, I guess, the triggers, or what would that be where the caseloads would get so high that they would then need someone else to step in? Are they there now? Has this other new municipal court judge sort of alleviated all of that? I'm just trying to get an idea.
Thank you for your question. Rion Jarvis Denman for the record. Chairman Flores, through you to Assemblywoman Considine. Thank you for those questions. Yes, so the city of North Las Vegas did recently open another judicial department, excuse me. So the caseload has been sort of shifted, but the purpose of that second judicial department was to create a specialty court program to promote rehabilitation and improve recidivism within the community. So the focus of that court is on helping defendants to get, or assisting defendants in getting help and seeking the resources that they need to stop committing crimes and to be able to be a productive member of society. So that is the focus of the new judicial department. And those kind of programs take a significant amount of time. because the judge and the entire team, the prosecutors, public defenders, everybody has to be involved in that process, and it can take up to 2 years even to get people through that program and to help them get the resources that they need. So that court is going to be very busy doing that, covering those matters. But the traffic, I guess taking away traffic cases would help possibly in the future. I think currently right now, before we had 2 judicial departments, the court had been using pro tem judges to hear traffic matters in municipal court because the judge could not handle all of the traffic cases plus the additional matters that come through the municipal court. As of now, I believe that the 2 departments are handling everything that's coming through without the need to use pro tem judges to hear those traffic matters. But in the future, if the city does continue to grow and additional matters are needed to be heard, then those traffic cases could possibly go to a hearing commissioner. And then to get to your other point of appointments, yes, these hearing commissioners would be appointed, but that's why we wouldn't want them to be taking on matters such as domestic violence or DUIs. Those would be for the municipal judges who are in the elected positions to take those matters and to work with defendants in those matters.
Thank you very much. That kind of actually gets to what I was asking, I guess. It was, you mentioned the specialty court program. So if it is a specialty court program, it does take a lot of time to do. You're saying that the hearing commissioners, perhaps you're saying that the hearing commissioners wouldn't step in and take up the space for that judge in that specialty court program, but because it's so focused and takes so much time. Is that possibly correct?
Rian Jarvis Denman for the record, Chairman Flores, through you to Assemblywoman Considine. I apologize. I'm not sure if I understood your question, but I don't know if this will help clarify, but it would be, so the hearing commissioner would just be there to take like the overflow traffic cases, essentially. And I believe that's how it works in the city of Las Vegas, where they hear traffic cases and sort of step in and take those matters away from the judges.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, to me, having an elected judge to see overseeing the bigger cases is very important. So I was just trying to get to why not just expand if one was a specialty court, why not just in the future expand to another judge as opposed to hearing commissioners who are appointed. And then just one last quick question. And if you can just tell me, what is the appointment process? Who is doing those appointments?
Thank you. Rian Jarvis Denman for the record, Assemblyman Flores through you to Assemblywoman Considine. So the reasoning for the hearing commissioner and not opening just another judicial department would be to keep the cost down for the city, but to allow for still quality municipal services to continue in municipal court so that judges' matters can be heard fairly quickly. But the cost to the city in opening an entire judicial department, there's additional staffing costs and additional prosecutors that would be needed and other public defenders that would be needed in that courtroom. The traffic commissioner would still have prosecutors and defense counsel in there, but it would just be an additional staffing issue, I believe. And then the appointment process was your second question, and that would be done by council. The way that the city of Las Vegas did this is that they passed and adopted an ordinance regarding how hearing commissioners would be selected. And I imagine that council would do something similar to that, where we would take a list or have people provide different resumes and that kind of thing. And then council could appoint hearing commissioners through that method.
Thank you very much. And then last quick question is, then how often or when is the next election for your municipal court judges?
Thank you, Rian Jarvis Denman for the record, Chairman Flores through you to Assemblywoman Considine. I believe the next judicial election is 2022. Thank you.
And ma'am, and I apologize for not saying this to you previously, but please feel free to go direct. Assemblywoman Considine, did you have a follow-up to that?
No, thank you. I appreciate the answer. It's my understanding that the current municipal court judges are now up for re-election in 2022. So if that's correct, I'm done. If not, please correct me.
Thank you, Rian Jarvis Denman, for the record, and Chairman Flores, thank you for letting me go direct. Assemblywoman Considine, to answer your question, one of the judicial departments is up for election in 2022. A judge for the new department was just appointed recently because that new department was opened, and to ensure that the judicial departments were staggered, that judge was appointed to a longer term, so that will not be up for election in the 2022 election.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and thank you, Chair, for allowing me the time.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Next, I'll go to Vice Chair Torres.
Thank you, Chair. And okay, I think I'm unmuted. Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I have a couple more questions about the hearing commissioners as well. And I appreciate you for considering to answer all the questions that we have on this. I think it's just it's a significant change to the charter, and I just want to make sure that I understand it a little bit better. And so I'm just wondering what other cities have similar language to this around hearing commissioners, and if there's a reason why we would go for hearing commissioners instead of just expanding the amount of municipal judges.
Thank you for your question. Rian Jarvis Denman for the record, and Vice Chair Torres, to your question. The other charter that has this the same language is the City of Las Vegas. That's where we got the language from. So we mirrored it after the Las Vegas charter and just changed the references to the North Las Vegas Municipal Code. But the language was in there so that hearing commissioners could hear misdemeanors other than DUIs. So we wanted to make that clear in here. To go to your second question, the hearing commissioner would be a lower cost to the city to allow some of those traffic cases to be heard on a faster basis if the courts get clogged up. Having the appointment of a hearing commissioner could take those cases away from the other departments so that the other departments can focus on the higher level offenses and other issues that are going on in the city.
Madam Vice Chair, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm having some Zoom issues today. Thank you. I appreciate the response. And so I'm just wondering how many cases the municipal judges are currently dealing with, and if this is like higher than the average than what like other cities are handling.
Thank you. Rian Jarvis Denman for the record. So I don't have the specific numbers for this year, but I can tell you that in fiscal year 2018, there were 25,928 cases filed. 20,336 of those were traffic cases. In fiscal year 2019, there were 28,899 cases filed, and 23,607 of those were traffic cases. In 2020, during the pandemic, there were 21,642 cases filed. 17,057 of those were traffic cases. That information comes from the Supreme Court website. They have the annual report of the judiciary that includes those numbers. So that's just to show that the majority of those cases are traffic cases that are filed each year. And the court does hear a significant number of cases for the number of departments that are in the city. The Las Vegas Municipal Court has 6 departments and a hearing commissioner. They do have a larger population than the city of North Las Vegas, but other similarly situated cities such as Reno, which has a closer population, They have 4 judges, and the city of North Las Vegas up until 2 months ago had only 1 judge. So there were a significant number of cases being heard by 1 judicial department.
Thank you. I appreciate the response, and I guess that kind of answers the question, right? So if the city of Reno has a similar population to the city of North Las Vegas, and they have several more judges, it just seems to me that that should be the way that we're moving, is towards increasing the amount of municipal judges instead of the amount of hearing commissioners present. So I just don't know that I can get on board with having a hearing commissioner. I just don't see that it's necessary, and I don't. And you know, if there's any data that you have that there's a significant amount more cases in the city of North Las Vegas than there are in like how many cases that those judges are dealing with in comparison to how many cases the judges are dealing with in other cities in the area or in our state, like Reno or Las Vegas, that would be helpful. But I think without seeing that data, I don't know that that's something that I really understand. And then I have another question regarding Section 11 of the legislation. And I just wanted to understand the part about making the city attorney serves at the pleasure of the city council and may be removed at any time in accordance with the terms of the city attorney's employment contract. And I'm just wondering if this is standard with other city charters, or if this is something different, or what's the reasoning and the logic behind this?
Thank you, Vice Chair Torres. Rian Jarvis Denman for the record. Just to go back to your point on hearing commissioners, really quick, the judicial departments, again, they take more of a structural budgetary issue, and so this was just to address that and allow another avenue for cases to be heard if necessary in the future. But yes, if the population grows, a judicial department may be necessary in the future. And then to answer your question regarding Section 11. There are other city charters that point to employment agreements. The way that the city is made, or the city charter is written, is that the city manager and the city attorney are both appointed directly by council and serve at the will of council. And both of those positions have employment agreements that explain how each of those positions should be terminated. And so this is just to clarify that the terms of the employment agreement should govern, and that addresses due process issues in the firing and hiring of those positions. So this is, I'm not exactly sure if that specific language is in any other city charter, but there are other city charters that discuss employment agreements.
Again, I would like to, before voting on this bill, and I know that obviously we'll be pretty quickly with the deadline fast approaching, I would like to see what the language looks like in other city charters, so that we have, so that we can make sure that it's standard and comparable to what is being done, so that it's not something completely different in the city of North Las Vegas, but it's standard with what other city charters have. I had another question. I apologize, Chair. I have a couple more questions, if that's all right.
Please.
Thank you. So I'm looking specifically at, I feel like I'm going like backwards through the bill, and I apologize. And now I'm looking at Section 10 of the bill, where we're changing some of the responsibilities of the city clerk. And if you could just explain some of the logic for lines 18 through 21, where we're removing the need for the city clerk to supervise and coordinate administrative and responsible clerical work or attending all meetings of the city council. It seems to me that, you know, I just know what the important role that our chief clerk has here in the state assembly. And so I imagine that they have a similarly important role within the city council. So I'm just wondering why we would remove those sections.
Thank you, Vice Chair Torres. Rian Jarvis Denman for the record. So we weren't, or the changes are not to actually completely change the city clerk position. This is really just a consolidation effort and cleaning up this language. When we discussed it with the clerk's office, this was her recommendation for kind of getting this in line with what she actually does and making this a little bit clearer. So if you look at subsection 1C, that provision still includes that it is her duty to attend all city meetings of the city council. And then the record keeping for the city, that is still part of her duties through let's see, I think it's subsection 2, as well as subsection 1E includes keeping transcripts. So those those subsections that were taken out, they are in other parts of that provision, but they're just worded maybe a little bit differently to make it clearer what she does. But we didn't take any duties of hers away that I'm aware of, other than updating language just to make it sound more up to date, more consolidated, and provide a clearer representation of what the city clerk does.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I see what you're acknowledging there. And then lastly, I just want to acknowledge my colleague Assemblyman Anderson's comments on Section 6 of legislation. I think that this is an opportunity for us to kind of make some changes to how that looks, and I do have some fears that this could be easily misconstrued or abused by local governments in subsection 4 of Section 6. And so I hope that we can kind of work on some cleanup language or removing parts of that. I think that those are already things that, local law enforcement agencies and cities would have the ability to do. I'm not quite comfortable with that specific language regarding public demonstrations and processions, which includes our right to protest and our right to assemble, or preventing riots, and without a definition of the word riots either. So I just have a couple of concerns about that language that I'm hoping that you can.
Thank you, Vice Chair Torres. Rian Jarvis Denman, for the record. We agree, we don't want this provision to be misconstrued, and certainly want to ensure that all practices are being done in accordance with the Nevada and the U.S. Constitution. So I look forward to working with you on changing that language to meet those concerns.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Assemblyman Ellison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mine's real light, and it pertains to Section 3.1. And on page 4, under special meetings, you removed under 2A, it says no contract involving expenditures of money except for emergency purchase may be made or claim are allowed. Boy, that kind of enhanced the body really bad when you get such long agendas. So I brought this up once before, so I'm glad to see that removed. Was that just to bring it up to the times?
Thank you, Assemblyman Ellison. Rian Jarvis Denman, for the record. Yes, that provision was very restrictive for City Council for special meetings, and this was that portion of the charter provision was changed based on other cities' charters to allow for special meetings to include anything that is included in the agenda. Special meetings still have to be noticed in accordance with NRS 241, and they have to be posted, and everybody has to know what's going on at that meeting. But this will allow the City Council to conduct the business that's included in the agenda at the special meeting of council without the restrictions that were currently in that bill. And that allows them to address things that need to be addressed on a more urgent basis than the bi-monthly meetings that they currently hold. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Assemblyman Ellison, I don't know if you had a follow-up. I believe you mentioned you had a few questions. Feel free to ask.
Actually, that's the only one I had, and all my other ones were answered in question 4. So, there's a couple little tweaks that was mentioned in there, but other than that, I thought it was a pretty good bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman. We'll go back to Assemblywoman Anderson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll make it very quick, I promise. Thank you, Ms. Jarvis, for all the information. I don't see in here, and I've tried to do some research as well really quickly during this hearing. Do you have a charter committee, or is this language being brought forward from the City Council? And is the appointment, if so, is the appointment done in the NRS statutes, which I can get you that number if you like?
Thank you, Rian Jarvis Denman, for the record. To answer your question, the charter currently does not have a charter committee, and the city does not have a charter committee. These changes were brought to council. The original changes from SB 464 were brought to council back in 2018 before the 2019 legislative session. And for this legislative session, they were brought to council again in July of last year. So they were held brought forward at a public hearing, and the city did not receive any comments on these changes. Thank you.
Thank you. I just would do a push with a city of 246,000. It might make sense to have a charter committee as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. At this time, we'll go to Assemblywoman Martinez.
Thank you, Chair. So the question that I have is in regards to your newly appointed judge. How long is his term?
Thank you, Rian Jarvis Denman, for the record. The new judge was appointed to a term to last until 2026.
Is that consistent with the other terms as well, or is this a longer term?
Thank you for your question. Rian Jarvis Denman, for the record. Currently, judges who are elected serve for a term of 6 years. So the appointment process is a little different when a new department is created under the charter. The city council must appoint a judge to the new department. And the judge's terms need to be staggered so that no two judges are elected at the same time. So this was part of the reason that council appointed the judge to the longer term. Additionally, this was in working with the courts to make sure that this specialty court program got off and was launched successfully. So this was also public policy to allow the judge the time and get the resources and build the relationships necessary to make the specialty court a success, which it does take a significant effort to do that. And so the judge is building relationships with different rehabilitation programs and different services that may be needed for defendants or people who come into the court system in North Las Vegas and need those services and need that help. This will help build up that program to make it as robust as the city and the municipal court want to make it, which is to make sure it provides a broad reach and really addresses the issues that our citizens are seeing.
Follow-up, Chair?
Follow-up, please.
So if you're trying to stagger him, wouldn't it make more sense to have the term up in 2024 instead of 2026? It seems like a long time for an appointed.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Martinez. Rian Jarvis Denman, for the record. Again, I think that was a public policy decision just to make sure that that court has the time to build up the specialty court program and make sure that it can achieve the goals of the municipal court and the city.
Thank you.
Members, any additional questions? I know the chat was active, so I apologize if I skipped over some of you. But please feel free to unmute yourself at this time.
Thank you, Chair. Assemblywoman Thomas.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Please.
Thank you. I just have two brief questions. And the first one, well, let's go with the follow-up question of the specialty court. Earlier, you had said that the specialty court, excuse me, by the way, the presentation was really good. I appreciate your time and effort in going over this with us. Back to the specialty court. The cases that the judge will be handling, are they muni cases? And if they are, why a 2-year program? Because, you know, if a person is sentenced in a specialty court, would they fall under cases that prolong their sentence to 2 years?
Thank you for your question. Rian Jarvis Denman, for the record. Thank you. So these are all going to be municipal court cases heard in the specialty court. So I apologize. I believe I said 2 years earlier, and I was thinking of other specialty courts in the Valley where some of these programs do take a long time to have people go through. I am not sure what the length of time will be for the court cases that are heard in the specialty court program in North Las Vegas. I believe it'll depend on the offense and the services that are necessary or needed for each of the defendants. So it certainly would not go beyond the term of confinement or whatever they would be subject to under the current penalty system for misdemeanor crimes. But there may be some additional services that are given through the court process. And the programs do take a significant amount of effort just to make sure that people are actually succeeding in these programs and that they have a lot of judicial oversight to make sure that they're meeting the goals.
Okay, thank you. Follow up, Chair?
Follow up, please.
Right, my second question, and back to the specialty court, I really would like if you could give more detail, written detail about the specialty courts, how they would flow, because this is something that really is, a concern to me, especially when we're talking about issues concerning our veterans. And my second question actually is Section 13, Subsection 1, Subsection 2B. It says that the qualification of a hearing commissioner has to be a resident of the state, but how long? I mean, residency could be 6 weeks, no?
Thank you for your question, Assemblywoman Thomas. Rian Jarvis Denman for the record. For your first question regarding the specialty courts, if you are interested in seeing more information, there was a hearing recently, I believe it was in March, in front of City Council, where Judge Lee, who was the appointed judge to that department, put together a presentation of the specialty courts and all that they do. And there are veterans programs included in that. And I'm sure that I could absolutely find you additional information, written information for you to review regarding the specialty court programs and all that those entail. I know Council and the municipal court are very excited about the program and doing more to help the community and to reduce the recidivism, improve rehabilitation, and work toward building a better community with the court system. So we can certainly make those available to you, Assemblywoman Thomas. And then for your second question regarding the provision, be a resident of the state. Again, this language was taken directly from the city of Las Vegas and mirrored after the city of Las Vegas. So I believe that's what they had in theirs. And we certainly could amend that to include a time frame as to, a specific number of years or how long that person should be a resident of the state. Thank you.
Thank you. I would appreciate getting that feedback and for you to take a look at residency. I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Members, I don't see any other questions in the chat, but again, if I accidentally skipped you, please unmute yourself and announce yourself. I don't believe I see any other questions there. And I echo the sentiment of some of our colleagues raising some of the concerns, but I'm confident that we'll be able to work together on some of these sections and be able to get you moving in the right direction here. So with that, we'll go ahead and open it up the hearing, open it up so we can invite those wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 55. Broadcast, please.
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 55, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in support at this time.
We'll go to those wishing to testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 55.
To testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 55, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Great. Next, we'll invite those wishing to testify in the neutral position for Assembly Bill 55.
To testify in the neutral position on Assembly Bill 55, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in the neutral position at this time.
Thank you. If we could have you come back and please, any closing remarks you may have, and we may have 1 or 2 additional questions for you, but any closing remarks, please.
Thank you, Rion Jarvis Denman for the record. Chairman Flores and members of the committee, thank you so much for taking the time to hear our bill this morning, and we really appreciate your comments and feedback, and we look forward to working with you on this bill and getting this moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And if we can go back to Assemblywoman Martinez for 1 additional question, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify, why do the judges need to be staggered? I'm not really understanding that.
Thank you, Rion Jarvis Denman for the record. I'm not sure what the policy was behind that from the beginning, but I know that it is important to have some sort of consistency within the municipal court so that things can take on gradual changes rather than everything changes at once. And it's probably helpful to have other people in there to help with new judges and that kind of thing. But I'm not sure 100% what the background is on that and why that is necessary. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I answer that?
Before we go to you, Assemblyman Allison, let me go to Assemblywoman Martinez for a follow-up, and then we'll go right to you right afterwards.
Do they stagger the judges in other departments or other places that you know of?
Thank you, Assemblywoman Martinez. Rion Jarvis Denman for the record. I believe that most judicial departments are not all the judicial departments will be up for vote at the same time. There may be a number of them at the same time in other courts, but not all of them at the same time. For example, our district court that was a lot of the positions were up for election at the last election last year. It was not all of the judicial departments, but there were several of them up at the same time. But in that instance, those judicial departments would be staggered. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Assemblyman Allison, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to add in that most, like the city council and the county commissioners, are staggered in the judges. And the reason that is for historical knowledge. It's on there. So if you got a new judge that's coming in and you still got historical knowledge from the other judges sitting on the seat. So that's usually why they do that. It's pretty common. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman Ellison. I know we have another question from Assemblywoman Brown-May, please.
Thank you, Chair Flores. I apologize for the late question. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the appointment process versus an election of a judge. And being in an appointed seat currently, I'm here to fill in existing terms. So I'm curious to know if you can talk to us a little bit about why we would appoint a judge in North Las Vegas for a longer term instead of a shorter term, instead of an election.
Thank you, Rion Jarvis Denman for the record. The appointment for the judge currently was due to a new department opening, and it was not to fill a vacancy in the current situation. And then with respect to hearing commissioners, this is just to hear lower level traffic cases that could be heard and dealt with in a faster pace than some of the judicial departments could hear it. So again, that hearing commissioner provision just takes some burden off of the courts if necessary in the future. Adding this provision would not necessarily give the municipal court hearing commissioners at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Assemblywoman Considine, please.
Thank you, Chair Flores. Thank you for the chance to come back. I just wanted to make kind of a comment that I'm seeing following up on Vice Chair Torres's comment earlier. I seem to see a movement away from hearing masters, and I understand that there's an issue about funding, but if this court was created and it's a specialty court, that's fantastic. But if that money can be found to create a specialty court for something, I would hope that the money could be found to allow people who have traffic tickets or criminal issues or any of those issues to be in front of someone who is elected as opposed to appointed. And hearing masters having that appointment instead of election, I just think that's something that we're trying to move away from. So I just kind of wanted to echo the Vice Chair's point earlier. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Members, any additional questions? Seeing none, I want to thank the City of North Las Vegas for powering through that original presentation and coming prepared to answer a lot of our questions. Thank you very much for that. I anticipate members will continue to reach out and work with you. North Las Vegas, thank you for your willingness to work with our members. And I'm sure we'll land somewhere good where we can take care of all the issues we have on our end and take care of the big concerns you have to take care of on your end. So with that, we'll close out the hearing on Assembly Bill 55. Next on the agenda, we have public comment. I want to remind those of you intending to call for public comment that this is a time for you to speak about general matters that fall within the purview of our committee. It is not a time to reopen a hearing. If you do that, we will cut you off. I don't want to, so just please, even if you have to phrase it in a different way, whatever it may be, but please don't try to reopen a hearing. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to cut you off and I don't want to do that. So we'll go to public comment at this time, please.
To take place in the public comment queue, please press *9 now. Caller with the last 3 digits of 681. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is Darlene Anderson, ANDERSON, and I am a resident in Clark County. And I've been a resident here for the last 3 years. And what I've noticed about the public education system is that African American children, they do not provide the academic progress for the maintenance of effort for those children that are at risk. And really, there was a hearing, and Nevada agreed to provide services to the children in juvenile hall, which they were not getting any services. But I don't hear any conversation about the maintenance of effort for the children who are at risk and who are Black, and how Clark County has a 259% Wolf of the Fines issues. But the Year Up money and the learning loss money has to do with services for people who haven't had any services. And that's what I want to hear, what's happening in Nevada, because I don't hear it yet. Thank you so much for your time.
And thank you for calling us this morning. Next caller, wishing to speak during public comment.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 556. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Anne Marie Grant, ANNEMARIEGRANT. My brother Thomas Purdy was a guest at the Peppermill Casino when he had a mental health crisis and was hogtied by Reno PD, and then 40 minutes later still hogtied, asphyxiated by Washoe County deputies. Today I want to read a little excerpt from the Sparks Police independent investigation regarding the Peppermill, because I know politicians do like to take money from casinos. During the investigation, Peppermill security officer Montiel informed investigators that she had issues with the way some Peppermill security officers treated Purdy. Montiel didn't like the way Purdy was taken down the stairs and how Purdy was dropped on the ground. Montiel also stated that during the incident, she wasn't sure how it happened, but she heard a smack and saw Russell Smith on top of Purdy. That's the security guard. Their names were Andrew Miller, Zachary Shiner, Kyle Von Cross, Samantha Montiel, and Russell Smith. A video that was provided by the Pepper Mill depicts Smith in the holding room at the Pepper Mill after the incident at 0246 hours. On the video, a female enters the holding room and Smith states, "You missed your opportunity, this blank boy." The female tells Smith that she went to lunch and Smith states, "F lunch, this MF was fighting and yelling." Smith then lowers his voice and looks around the room before saying, "He's at the top of the stairs. I pulled his ass down the steps." As Smith made this statement, he pulled his arms back, demonstrating a tugging motion. The female then walks to a nearby telephone, and as the female makes a call, Smith turns away from a camera and makes another comment about his actions. As he motions with his right arm, the videotape stops a short time later. That video is on Reno Cop Watch, the only agency that ever reached out to assist my family in getting any truth outside. I'd urge you all to go to the Reno Cop Watch Facebook page and watch the videos. Please support bills that promote transparency and accountability. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller wishing to speak in public comment, please.
To take place in the public comment queue, please press *9 now. Caller with the last 3 digits of 635, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last... Go ahead, caller.
John Carlo, calling from Las Vegas. How are y'all doing today? I hope that each one of you remembered the Lord Jesus Christ's sacrificial death yesterday, that he died for you and me and the whole world. I'm calling to your attention voting integrity. One thing I heard you guys didn't mention was fingerprint verification. We need to add security to our voting integrity. We need no internet connection. I don't know why you guys want to keep using the internet national database for elections. Bad, bad, bad. Do not do that. And also, who else is it in the government? That's what I want. You guys need to work on the unemployment system. It is not working for us. And that was before COVID. So I don't know who heads that up. I can't get them to call me back to tell me why, they're so inefficient. But if you guys want us to vote for the common man, y'all need to focus on the things that are going to help the general public, not just like people with a lot of money. All right. Thank you very much.
And thank you for this morning. We'll continue with those wishing to testify during public comment.
Chair, the public line is open, but there are no more callers at this time.
Thank you. Members, thank you this morning for your attentiveness in trying to power through what was a pretty lengthy meeting this morning. Tomorrow we have quite a bit of work to do in just our work session, and then we have 4 bill hearings, Assembly Bill 331, 334, 335, 445. I wanted to use today as a gauge for whether or not we could power through everything before 11:30, and we finished just about 6 minutes prior, and that was with 3 bills only and powering through 1 presentation, asking no questions, and not doing a work session. So I don't know that it's realistic for us to achieve the same tomorrow. So based on just using today as a gauge, I think we're going to have to start tomorrow at 8 a.m. I know the agenda is posted at 9 a.m., so I wanted to get clarity and make sure that everybody understands that for the sake of getting everything done and ensuring that we don't inadvertently have to cut a bill presentation short, we're going to start tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. I know the rest of the week we still have it listed as 9. Again, we'll use tomorrow as a gauge. If we finish early tomorrow and we realize that we in fact did not need all that extra time, then perhaps we can stick with Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at the regular 9 o'clock start time. And I appreciate everybody's flexibility, but we'll use tomorrow as a gauge, but we will be starting at 8 a.m. Just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. Again, members, thank you for the questions today. Please give yourself an opportunity to go through all those items on work session and those items that we'll be hearing tomorrow so that we can be effective with our time. Thank you. This meeting's adjourned.